I got to get you in on this multi-screen life, man.
I know, you
You
really
got,
do.
you got to like that I'm all about that multi-screen life. Got to have
true.
the game on the TV, the
Oh,
game on the other screen.
maybe I'll just come over here for the multi-screen life.
If you come here, then I'm going to the ultimate multi-screen. I'm going to put like 8 screens on. I'm going
right.
to find screens that you didn't even know that I had.
Yeah, okay.
You are listening to episode 4 of the Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast, the podcast of 2 unqualified idiots rambling on sports topics they likely know nothing about for an indeterminate timeline and a hastily thrown together format. Brought to us this week by ICQ Chat Message. I'm Carlos Agazar, and with me as always is my co-host, Dave Turnbull.
I wonder if any listener is actually going to know what ICQ is.
That is my secret hope. I made a list.
I like it.
I'm gonna go real old school internet. You just wait and see.
All right.
It's gonna be good. So this week we've got a small smorgasbord of topics. The main topic of the overall discussion will be talking about the American League West. Continuing our MLB season preview. I didn't get to quite dig into the depth that I wanted to that we were able to do for the National League West. So I'm gonna depend on you to add some color to this
I'll
conversation.
do my best. I've got some good notes, so we'll see what happens.
There's a couple of them that I'm more comfortable with than others because we are back in the American League, so that's good. A couple of news and notes, though. First off the top, podcast-related news and notes. We've got a couple of updates.
And they're exciting.
Yes, so as of this broadcast, so I'm still waiting for confirmation on iTunes because our Apple overlords may bless us any day now with connection. But we are now on Spotify. We are on Google Music, and we are also available on Podbean if you happen to have that app, which is actually not a bad app. I played with it a little bit myself. And if for some reason those options do not satisfy you and you simply must have your fix of this podcast, somehow you're hearing it even though you didn't know where to find it. But if for whatever reason you can't find it on any of those platforms, you can also go to unnecessarypod altogether.podbean.com and you'll be able to see our pretty straightforward website where you can download all the shows thus far. That covers the podcast business. Now, as far as news and notes, we've got a couple of things we're going to talk about, beginning with our now weekly discussion on the Alliance of American Football. So, week 1 in the books. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I enjoyed it. I didn't necessarily think the brand of football was fantastic, but I think that has a lot to do with teams don't really know what the other teams have and what they don't have. And they haven't really schemed really well on defense yet. I think that'll come, and I think you'll get closer games as we move along. But I'm still going to watch this week. The one thing that I really, really did like was showing the challenge judge on TV. Mm-hmm. So where they would a coach would challenge a play, and then normally you'd have, if you're watching an NFL broadcast, you'd have like Mike Pereira come on and talk about, this is what I saw and this is what they should be calling, and then we'll see if they call it that way. Whereas in the AAF, you have somebody up in the booth who's watching the play, asks what the call was on the field, and then goes step by step as to what they're seeing and what they're going to tell the referee, who is then in turn going to tell that to the crowd and the television audience.
Yeah, talking really cool. Through, giving a little bit of justification, and also you actually got to see them talk through, hey, can you replay that angle? Or can you show me the other angle from the other side? You got to hear a little bit of that, which you kind of assume is kind of what's going on. But being able to see it is a little bit less... It feels like less of a time drain, watching someone actually deliberate and work through it, which you can see, versus the announcers just kind of trying to stall for time for an indeterminate period while they're trying to figure out what to call on the field.
Yeah, it's nice that you're seeing it in real time, so I think it draws the viewer in more to the replay as opposed to you sitting there going, they're just wasting time. Like, this is so obvious. We know this is an incomplete pass, or it's a complete pass, or he wasn't bad. Like, those really obvious ones where you're just like, why does this take 3 minutes when I just did it in 30 seconds? Now you actually have the process and you see it going through, and I think it's going to draw the viewer into it more.
Yeah, we'll see if the NFL ends up either adopting or flatly ripping it off. If they do, it's going to be kind of fun because then we can see that what we've always known all along. On the instant replays, the person is playing with their Nintendo Switch, which, at least I can respect.
Yeah, hey.
So as far as that's concerned, that's good. I thought about this a little bit, and in honor of you and your teaching ways, I gave it a grade. But I do have to break it down a little bit more. I'll give the overall grade, but there is some mitigating circumstances. I would give the overall week 1 a kind of a C-, which sounds a bit harsh. However, it's because certain specific aspects brought it down. On the on-field product, I actually give it kind of a solid B to a B+. Because on-field, I tempered my expectations. I knew what we were talking about. We're talking about folks that are kind of practice squad guys, former college players, maybe guys who had a cup of coffee in the NFL, some of them with more experience than others. And that's kind of what we got. The players who are like a Trent Richardson, who was an NFL player. You can argue about quality or whatnot, but who was an NFL player, was more of a standout. The quarterback play is okay, but part of that is because this league, as a developmental league, which is now kind of moving itself into, and they pretty much have declared themselves as such, their focus is going to be on improving those aspects you were talking about. Line play, which takes coaching, but now they're going to get the snaps and the reps to be able to do it. And considering they didn't really start playing scrimmages until January, in a month, that's not bad.
No, absolutely not.
And the one point that was made, I think, on the Pro Football Focus. So their podcast has started discussing, and I think Pro Football Focus is actually going to have specific content related to the Alliance of American Football, which is a big deal, which means because they're really doing a breakdown.
Anytime you can get anyone who's like a reputable football person or group talking about your league, that's a win.
Yeah, so from their standpoint, they are going to take it seriously in that they're going to grade players, they're going to grade, teams and plays and actually provide that kind of analytic data, which is great because then that kind of puts it kind of on par with, we're treating this as a professional football league, which is good. And kind of their early observations, which I kind of agreed with, is that when you're looking at it, you can really get the difference between an NFL wide receiver versus a Alliance of American Football wide receiver or even a good college wide receiver. There are some throws that the guys are making that are good throws that the receiver's dropping. And you kind of just take for granted because you look at the NFL, you look at an Odell Beckham or one of those guys, and you see those drills where they're making those one-handed catches, but then you see these guys with two hands dropping what seems like relatively an easy pass. Well, that's going to improve too because these guys are going to get those reps to be like, okay, there's a reason you're not in the NFL. It's because you don't make the routine passes. The NFL caliber guys have the hands already. You're going to have to develop the hands. Yeah. Because the NFL guys are working on their footwork and, their moves. Yeah, it's a different mentality.
I think you're going to see, at least this year, as you move from week to week, I think we're going to see it where you're going to see improvement week to week.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be also based on a lot on coaching. Like the better coaches are going to be able to take advantage of the better coaches are going to have a bigger advantage because the players haven't differentiated themselves yet. But the standouts are going to be dominant.
For sure. And the more you play, the more tape the coaches are going to get and be able to use that to affect their offensive and defensive schemes.
And I think where the big difference in quality of play is going to come, that's why I gave it a B, because to me, based on what I was expecting and based on what I think I got more or less what I was expecting, and it was solid. It has room for improvement. That's why it's not an A, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I think that's a fair grade.
Yeah.
I might go B-.
Yeah.
But, I'm still on that. There's nothing that I saw that is going to make me want to tune out now.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think the goal for week one was make it respectable. Make it so that, okay, I understand that these guys have rough edges. They're going to have to smooth that out. That's coaching. That's reps and that's practice.
And if you take if you compare this to the XFL, the original XFL.
Week one was terrible.
Well, yeah, they hyped it so much. The XFL I'm talking about. They hyped it so much that, this is real football. And then you watch the product and it sucked. Whereas here, they didn't hype it nearly to the same amount, but, they said, hey, we've got a product, and it's all about development, and you watched it, and if you're a football fan, you should like what you saw.
I would argue they overcompensated the other way. I think they tried so hard not to follow into that mistake of the XFL model that there were elements. So that leads me to my second subgrade. So my overall grade was a C-. For on-the-field product, I give it a B because I think it was solid for what it was, keeping in mind the mitigating circumstances, and there is room for improvement. Where they're still hurting, I think, is the logistics and the communication. Mm-hmm. So on that one, I have to give it kind of a D.
Does this include your personal beef with the league about not shipping things to Canada?
It does, and I have resolution on that, though. I did some intrepid reporting. And by that, I mean I sent an email. So I finally got fed up trying to, my ongoing saga of trying to get my Arizona Hotshots swag. So I finally got frustrated where I said, okay, you know what? I'm being dumb because I'm doing the internet thing. The internet thing is to keep complaining about it and then do nothing about it.
Yeah, that's the social media millennial thing.
Maybe making a meme or something. Like, that's really what it comes... And then asking for support on Facebook. Give me some likes.
There you go.
But I decided to go, we're in the millennial generation technically, but we're right in that phase where we're right between. We're at the end. We're the OG millennial generation right at that beginning portion, which means we also still have a sense of occasionally we'll just get irritated and be like, all right, I'm just going to do this myself. I'm going to fix it in some way.
Yeah, actually do something about it.
Yeah. So what I did is really simple in this case was I just decided I'm going to just ask them point blank. I just want to know, are you guys going to have any international shipping? Yes or no? And what can I expect with that? So I kept it fairly straightforward. It was very simple, and my response was glorious. It was, we are not set up to take Canada orders, not Canadian, but Canada orders at the present time. We hope to have this available in the near future. And that concludes my response. A wonderful one line.
Hey, at least you got something back.
I did.
You appreciate that. But like you said, if the XFL, the new XFL, which isn't coming into being until next year, can already ship to Canada.
I've gotten email updates already, by the way. My stuff's already shipped. So it should be en route. So by next week, I should be sitting here, maybe talking about the AAF with my XFL swag.
Here's what I wonder, and I know I don't have an answer for the podcast listeners right now, and you don't either. Maybe we can check into this for next week. But I'm curious: do they ship to American territories? So do they ship things
Puerto
to
Rico
or Guam or
maybe
American Samoa or places like that?
Possibly.
Right.
That might be possible. To be honest with you, though, here, and let's just make this abundantly clear. My expectations, I'm not worried about it. At the end of the day, when and if they make it available, I'll probably still buy it. It did temper my enthusiasm because I kind of wanted to have my stuff in hand. There's some good product and some good merch that they have going on.
I know, especially since we're offering free advertisement for the league. Like, you want a Canadian base for a podcast. AAF, you should be listening to us.
Yeah. And later on, I think before we finish our AAF discussion, I'll give a little mini shout out to, I did see that there is a nascent AAF podcast that is trying to do its thing. I'll share it with you and also share it with the audience a little bit. It's early days for them. They're getting started as well, so I might as well give them a little shout out as well. So the end result of that kind of falls under logistics. So I don't mind that they don't have anything at this time. Cool, no problem. But I don't know why, from a customer service standpoint, you couldn't have just gone like, okay, why don't you just tell us what you want? Maybe we can just get you a quote. It's not something that I would do 100% of the time, but since I asked point blank and I emailed them specifically to ask, how about one of you goes to the post office and weighs a box? You don't have to do it every time, but you can just sit there like, since you took the time to email, you know what? I'll take the initiative and just check. Because the United States Postal Service does send things to Canada. It is going to be more expensive than normal, but throw it at me and see if I say yes. Maybe I would. But it's you have to at least offer it to me for me to say yes or no.
So we'll see what happens with that.
That kind of puts the logistics as kind of a D. But along the logistics, I said logistics/communication.
Right.
Communication goes, they did respond to that, which is good. But there's still nothing on the website if I hadn't emailed them point blank to ask.
Right.
So it's like an FAQ. Throw one in there. By the way, international shipment, we're working on it. We'll update when we have something.
Yeah, give the people a little bit more information.
Yeah. And along the same lines, the first CBS game that they broadcast this past week wasn't available on the website and wasn't available through the app, which is not the end of the world. That happened to be apparently a CBS, part of this, not CBS, but part of the CBS sports agreement, that end of it. The CBS games apparently are available, but the CBS Sports Network ones are not. But what they did, and what I ended up doing is I took the link from Twitter because I wanted to make sure I quote them correctly. So I will give that to you. So on the AAF official Twitter, they said, because of contractual agreements, the Alliance will not stream games carried on the CBS Sports Network. Games can be watched on authorized TV providers and authenticated CBS SN apps. Full game videos for VOD streaming will be available on AAF.com tomorrow. Great. Problem. This was minutes before the beginning of the game.
Yeah, so if you're looking for it and you're like hyped up to say, hey, I think I'm going to stream this game because you don't have a cable package or something like that, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, you have to give the people a heads up. So as far as that's concerned, that's still something that the AAF really is still struggling with. They haven't mastered the fine art of, you should have been telling me that a day or two before. At the very bare minimum. Even if I don't happen to catch it, then I can't say you didn't provide it. Another thing I did is I pulled up the AAF website because I know from the way they've done it, they'll show upcoming games, they'll show different things, and they'll show scores of the week they completed, but they still haven't really, I think they're still using like a series of templates, and I think as things are being done, like game day, they'll switch to this template, this other one. It feels like there's somebody who has it on the back end has to keep switching between different templates, so they still don't have a standings page. They don't have a, previous scores page, although they do show it on the side when you scroll down, when this template happens to be on. And also things like, updating the schedule, things like that. Like you've got the schedule, but on the main schedule, if you look at it, when you actually go to the website, it doesn't actually say what network it's on. Even though they had a graphic which shows it, like put it on the page.
Right.
It's these little logistic things. It goes along with that thing that I was talking about with the store. It's the little logistic things that it's like, all you need is a decent webmaster who would be like, oh, you know what, guys, we should probably have this stuff. real basic, because this is information. Especially when you're talking about the store, you're talking about money. And then things like this, it's like if I go to the website's not super useful to me, except for very specific things. It's something the league is going to have to work on. Otherwise, though, I would say that week 1 was kind of interesting. I did enjoy going to the AAF Reddit, though. The memes. The early memes. If you're a Memphis fan, boy, you got torched. All the memes. All the glorious, glorious memes. And funny enough, the episode of the podcast that I'll shout out, so it is the Allies podcast is what it's called. And I'll try to include a link in the description of the YouTube video. And now that I have a little bit more space on Podbean, I can actually give better show notes. So I can actually include that information. I'll put it on there. I've subscribed to it. It's not bad. It's very clear that this is the first podcast they're trying to put together. But they already have a far better studio than we do, and I'm insanely jealous. I'm just saying, they've got 2 iMacs and the microphone. They're actually sitting in a studio with a big LCD screen beside them. And I'm like, how dare you? Just saying.
You got to start somewhere, right? Apparently their start is a little bit better than
Well,
us.
apparently they work in a media company. And I was like, so they're taking time out of the thing that they should be working in to work to create a podcast.
Now we only have to figure out a way how we can take time out of our regularly scheduled jobs to record this podcast.
It's next level. I think if I could always like commandeer one of the rooms of the bank, and I think that would be next level. It's like, what are they doing? It's like
randomly in the middle of the bank.
Well, all the rooms we have like glass, so you can totally see what's happening inside. So literally, everyone's just looking at it, it's like, just looking through the glass. It's like, we have an audience. Yeah. So as far as that's concerned, I'll give them the shout out. I'll include that link in the description. But as far as AAF Week 1 is concerned, we're definitely seeing a couple of things. Orlando is actually quite good. They played well. Arizona played well. I think it's going to be very interesting to see. And Birmingham demonstrated a good defense. But the question is going to be whether that's good defense or is it Memphis trying to figure out how to score points.
Yeah, which, give it another couple of weeks and we'll have some answers to those questions.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a little bit more of an idea, and we'll have to see how Atlanta rebounds from not a great performance and all that. That good stuff. That is week 1 of the AF, and kind of our early grades. Like I said, I will withhold judgment, and I'm perfectly willing to bump it up as they start figuring out some of these logistics, but there is some work that needs to be done.
Yeah. And the second thing I want to talk about, it's still football related, but in our news and notes before we get into our AOS preview, is the CFL. Yes, the glorious Canadian Football League. And for those of you who maybe know this or maybe don't, CFL free agency started this week. And it started on Tuesday, so that's February 12th. And the thing that got me was that there's some big moves that happened right away, like big moves. So Edmonton's quarterback, who statistically was the best quarterback in the league last year, Mike Riley, went to BC, and he signed with BC. So now you're thinking if you're Edmonton, you're like, oh, crap, right?
Usually, if I lived in Edmonton, I'd be thinking, oh, crap, regardless of the outcome.
Fair enough. But
scenario.
Maybe you're not thinking as much, oh, crap, because basically just after that signing was announced, Trevor Harris, who's the quarterback of the Ottawa Redblacks, sorry, Oaks, went to Edmonton. So what I'm seeing so far, I mean, obviously there's still time.
Is it I should text Oaks to make sure he's still alive?
Maybe. But is that the West has gotten a lot stronger. So Calgary has been the powerhouse for the last few years in the Western Division of the Canadian football. And BC hasn't been really great. But now you see BC's really making some strides. Edmonton's been there, but kind of up and down. But then they really replaced right away. Winnipeg's defense has gotten better. So I see the West really doing well right now, which they have been for the last few years. The good news for me as a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan is, did Hamilton make any big, huge moves? Not yet. But the team that Hamilton lost to in the Eastern Final last year, just got a whole lot worse. And Montreal and Toronto aren't a whole lot better yet. So if you're a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan, take solace in the fact that you got a really, really, really good chance to win the Eastern Division and then lose to whoever came out of the West in the Grey Cup.
This is very important CFL coverage and insight that we got here. Unfortunately, the breaking news that the Hamilton Ticats have been traded to the Alliance of American Football for the Memphis Express renders that all moot and pointless. That's really unfortunate, Good luck with Memphis.
All right.
You do have Mike Singletary, though. That's nice for you. Maybe he can strap up and play.
Yeah, you know what? They may need that.
That might help.
Based on what happened last week.
Absolutely.
So, shall we move into baseball, or we still got a couple?
We got 1 or 2 more news and notes, and then we will finish up. So, really quickly, one of the first things that I wanted to mention. So, we did talk about the AF. We talked about a little bit of CFL. There isn't a lot more that I wanted to get outside of that, but I will make a brief passing mention.
Yes, the trade in the NFL
that will shift the fate of the AFC forever.
/ no.
Forever.
Okay.
Joe Flacco has been tentatively, because I think they're still working out the specific draft pick that's going to be involved in it, has been tentatively traded to the Denver Broncos for a mid-round draft pick, probably a fourth rounder is what I hear currently. There'll be more information and we'll get the updates as we go along. John Elway continues to try to do the carousel of quarterbacks to try to find somebody, and once again he follows a path not dissimilar to one of your heroes of broadcasting, Joe Buck. Whereas Joe Buck says it's loud, John Elway says he's tall. Because basically all his quarterbacks have nothing more in common than they're all tall.
This is true, actually. I had never thought about that before, but now thinking about it and who's been there and the type of quarterback John Elway was. And
he's basically looking for a prototype body type. Like John Elway has a type. And he's made very clear that he's looking for this in his quarterbacks, whatever they happen to be. Now, we're completely ignoring the fact that he's been an average quarterback for basically a decade, outside of, some good playoff performances, which we all acknowledge. When you win a Super Bowl, and did he not win the MVP in that Super Bowl, I believe? I could be mistaken.
I can't remember. He may have. Yeah. I don't know for
Regardless, though, he definitely has some good like if you look at his resume, he does have some good playoff performances. So we will acknowledge that he has had that. But in general, outside of that, he's the very definition of average. Like, there's nothing special about anything that Joe Flacco does.
True.
Nothing in his skill set.
But for Denver right now, average might be okay.
The problem is they're replacing Case Keenum, who statistically is the same guy. So you're not gaining anything. You're just kind of blaming Case Keenum for the fact that he played like Case Keenum,
which is unfair.
Yeah,
you can't expect him to play like Drew Brees or Tom Brady because he's Case Keenum.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate for folks in Denver. Folks in Baltimore are currently rejoicing, and the people in Vancouver are rioting in solidarity, as they do.
Yeah, fair enough.
So pretty standard, but yeah, end result is we don't think it's going to have a big impact. I think in the long run, it's not a story right now, and we'll discuss it more later. I'll be more interested in seeing where Antonio Brown goes. Absolutely. That may have more, I think that has a little more relevance, whether he stays in the AFC or not. That will have more relevance to the AFC picture, and we'll have to because I don't think that's tenable in Pittsburgh. I think they're done. Realistically, they should be done because he's kind of a problem. But he's still a good player. So the question is going to be if that's enough to offset. One discussion that we'll have later that I do want to kind of post for now. When do you think was the last time that you could say an elite wide receiver, we're talking top 2, top 3, elite wide receiver, has actually been involved in a Super Bowl winning team? I'm talking elite, top 2 or 3.
So I will think on that then.
Yeah. The best I can do is Jerry Rice right now.
That's my immediate reaction right now.
And I feel like if you have to go to Jerry Rice, that was the mid-90s.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That will require a little bit of research, but yeah.
That's your assignment.
Something good to ponder.
That's your homework. I'd like you to think on that.
All right.
Because and by the way, if any of you feel free in any of the comment sections, either in the video or in any of the podcast thing, and please leave comments if you catch any of the podcasts in any of the formats that we already previously discussed. But if you can think of one, by all means, because I thought of Randy Moss, but they didn't win. I thought of, Julio Jones. They didn't win. There have been some who have gotten close, who have gotten to the Super Bowl. But no, elite wide receivers. I feel like I can't think of one for a while, which actually doesn't say much for elite wide receivers. So the question becomes, do you really need them? Because because really the most elite of elite wide receivers in this year's Super Bowl was Julian Edelman. So do you really need one necessarily? They don't hurt, but do you need
clearly
one?
Not to win.
Yeah, that's just something to think about for everybody. Just a thought. So I think other than that, I think we're good. I think we can now get to the topic at hand.
All right.
Let's talk about the old American League West. Where would you like to begin in the American League West?
I think we'll continue as we did last week. I will give you my rankings 1 through 5, and then we will... You know what? Let's start with the Angels, because keeping with the LA theme. What I have right now, although I feel some of this is... I feel 2 and 3 are interchangeable potentially, as are 4 and 5, but forcing me to make a prediction. I'm picking the Houston Astros to win the division, followed by the Oakland Athletics, the LA Angels, the Mariners, and then the Texas Rangers.
Okay.
Do you want to agree with that or
unfortunately,
disagree with that?
Unfortunately, I kind of have to go chalk on this. Reason being that nobody has really made any seismic shift or moves that necessarily shift the order. We're kind of still in place a little bit, but we'll in the individual team breakdown. So I'll stick to the same. Astros winning the division again. Oakland second. LA Angels third. They could shift. I could see them possibly passing Oakland. That's a possibility, but right now I see it 1, 2, 3 that way. And then Seattle and Texas right now, as currently situated without some dramatic moves. Wherever Bryce Harper goes, by the way, Bryce Harper update, nothing has changed.
So, going with the Angels, first of all, the name still bugs me. I know this has nothing to do
The
with
Los
where they're
Angeles
gonna
Angels
finish.
of Anaheim.
Yeah, like just Anaheim Angels. I still think they should be called the California Angels, but that's just me. So, I think
They should be called the California Raisins, and then we would all cheer for them.
that's okay too. So, I feel like the offense is, this is what I see. I see the offense being good and the pitching being a bunch of question marks. That's sort of what I see with the LA Angels. So, they have like obviously Mike Trout, huge key, right? He's an amazing player. You've got Anderson Simmons on defense is going to be really good there. You have Shohei Ohtani, who's not actually going to pitch this year, or at least
Yeah, because I think he got the Tommy John surgery, right?
yeah. So he's going to DH this year. So we'll see what happens with that with him.
I think he's a
only
good hitter.
one.
I think
he
he's
is a good hitter.
Yeah.
But I mean, when he now only has to concentrate on one thing, will that change anything?
I will say, just because I think you're going to make reference to it. One thing, the problem with Otani not being able to pitch a little bit or possibly play a position is that unfortunately that takes away some DH time that probably should go to Albert Pujols.
Yes, which I was going to
Go for
mention,
it.
right? Because Pujols is crazy dropped off. Like I love Albert Pujols as like he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, respect.
But the problem is he shouldn't be maybe necessarily an everyday player now. He's really dropped off, but his contract is too huge. Nobody wants that contract unless the Angels are going to pay a sizable chunk of that.
Well, that kind of
maybe
goes back.
another
That
AL
goes
team
back.
might
That
take him
goes
as
back to
DH.
the Bryce Harper Manny Machado conversation that we had last week. Is you're not worried about the front end of the contract. You're worried about the back end.
Exactly.
Now he's older than the players in question when he got the mega deal, but you always had to know that in the back end of that deal you were going to get torched. You just had to know it was going to happen.
And if you're okay with just accepting that, then fair enough.
And he's got 3 years left.
Yeah.
So it's a long. He's already 39. He's going to be 42 by the time that's done. What on earth did you think you were going to get from Albert Pujols in age 40, 41, and 42? I can't imagine.
But maybe if he was just strictly sticking to DH, you could get maybe a little bit more out of him. But like you said, or we said, Otani's going to be DHing. So I imagine there'd be some games where Pujols may DH, but he's obviously going to be slotted in to start at first base. Cole Calhoun, they're talking about another offensive player, taking a little bit of a step backward last year, and I don't expect that to change much this year. So I see the offense being okay. Like I see a decent offense. Any offense that's anchored by Mike Trout and has a couple of pieces around him is going to be fairly decent.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think that's only enough to make you like kind of the way our ranking goes, though. It's going to make you kind of a middle tier team. I don't have too much more to add because realistically, go ahead.
No, well, I have some pitching notes. So, and this is the question with the pitching. So I think the offense is kind of we both sort of agree as to where it is. It's middling to maybe a little bit above middling, depending on the way things go, which is why they're at 3 and not at 2 in our ranking. But the pitching is a bunch of question marks. So last year they only had one pitcher who pitched 130 plus innings. So they had some question marks. So the big question mark now is, are Matt Harvey and Trevor Cahill and Cody Allen going to get it done?
Yep.
Right? And if the answer is yes, then that's where you could maybe see them moving up into number 2 in the division. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, if they have, if neither one of them pitches 130 or more innings because of injuries or performance or whatever, then I'm not looking forward to too much. If I'm going to Disneyland instead of going to an Angels game.
That's fair. I think the end result of a lot of what you're talking about is that the Angels are in an interesting spot where, yes, the Pujols contract is big. Yes, Ohtani is injured. It happens. And he's still going to be able to play some, and he'll be able to hit, which is good. So at least you're getting some of what he can bring to the table. But now, long term, the Angels are looking at what are we going to do, not necessarily this season, but over the next season or two. I don't know exactly how many years Trout has left before he can see free agency. But when Trout is eligible, his consistency is going to make him a valued asset. Where in contrast, I kind of teased the Bryce Harper thing. Trout's numbers don't blow me away, but he's just so solidly good all around. Mm-hmm. He can run, he can field, he can hit for average, he can hit for power. He's got a little bit of everything, and he's not an defensive liability. So when you've got all of it, the whole package, and it's consistent and it's year in and year out, that's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
So another team can look at it and go, hey, you know what? So then at that point, you ask yourself, if you're Anaheim or the LA Angels of Anaheim, you ask yourself, Do we finally start to build a team around this guy? We know that Pujols is eventually going to age out and he's going to go. It may be another year. It might just be this year because he can get to 2,000 RBIs. Gets to 2,000 RBIs, 650 home runs. Maybe he calls it. But there is a lot of money left on the table, so maybe they negotiate a buyout or something.
Yeah.
But even if you get rid of him, okay, great. So now you've got some financial flexibility. Cool. What are you going to do with it? Pitching, hopefully, but what else can you do?
Yeah, exactly.
What can you build around him? As far as the Angels are concerned, I agree with you for the most part. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Really, what I think, though, is that I'm kind of concerned about a bunch of these teams that are in that same kind of position, and we'll get to more of them as we go through the rest of the preview. But it's, what are you doing when you're just kind of there? Because it's not like they went actively to try to make any kind of a big move anyway. I'm not asking them to go and sign a mega free agent, but it's like, go get a number 2 or number 3 starter. Or go get somebody in the back end of that rotation so that you can try to take advantage of the lineup being okay. Try to do something with it.
Because for Oakland to be, right, Oakland's got a lot of things. Why don't we transition to Oakland then?
Oakland. Yep.
So Oakland's got to have a lot of things that go, a lot of repeat performances for them. So with the Angels, if they go out, they still particularly get a couple of people. If they've done that, then maybe that's where you see them flipping. Oakland, I think, is interesting. I was actually hoping, as somebody who really loves Major League ballparks and going to different ballparks and seeing the different quirks and things about ballparks, I was excited this year. I mean, Oakland doesn't have a great stadium, but the Raiders weren't going to be there anymore. So maybe they were going to do something with the stadium, and that could have been kind of cool. But now we're not sure where the Raiders are going to play next year.
I heard that they have already upgraded all their light fixtures. They screwed in, a new one. They went from the old plastic to the new plastic. The old one was starting to yellow. It was no good. You needed to replace it. As a homeowner, you should know that it's important to have nice light fixtures.
Yeah. And you know what? For the Coliseum, I don't actually know what the name of the stadium is. I'm just going to call it the Coliseum right now.
I've reached the status that I have with the Sky Dome, or I don't care what you want to call it. I'm just going to call it the Sky Dome, because as far as I'm concerned, that's what it is. In their heyday, it was the Coliseum. I'm good with it being the Coliseum.
Yeah. That probably is still the Coliseum. It's just a question
It's a something Coliseum.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. They got Marco Estrada, which I think is interesting from the Blue Jays. The question is, how good is he going to pitch?
I think he's going to pitch, but
right?
I think he's going to rebound a little bit. I think the thing with Estrada is that Estrada was never an ace, but he would have stretches where he would pitch very effectively. It goes back to the conversation we had about Kershaw last week. Estrada is a good example of that. Estrada at his best was never 50% of the pitcher that Kershaw was at his peak. However, Estrada pitched very intelligently. He was able to eat innings just by being smart. He didn't have the A-plus fastball. He had to figure out different ways to get batters out. And when it was working, he looked great. Well, there are plenty of pitchers who, if they're smart enough to work their way around a count and work their way around the hitter, well, that's enough. You can be effective. Be that guy. Do it. I think he can do that for Oakland. And he is very much a Oakland A's kind of guy in the sense that for what you're paying for him, because I think it was $3 million for the 1-year deal or something like that. Relative bargain. Like you don't need a lot in order to justify that and make you feel pretty happy.
Like that's
with
the kind of that's the kind of deal maybe LA should have made.
Well, that's the kind of deal the Blue Jays should have made.
Well, that too.
For $3 million, bring him back.
Well, that's a topic for a couple weeks from now.
We'll get to that. But I'm just saying, for $3 million, please, you can keep the guy.
But I think so they have some rotation questions. Hopefully, Estrada is pitching like you know. But I think they need a lot of repeat performances. Like, is Chris Davis going to hit 48 home runs this year?
No, but he's hit 40 the last 3 years.
Right? So as long as you have, that's the kind of thing. So if he's in that range, if he's around 40, above 40, and the rest of the sort of team is doing similar to what they did last year, then I don't see any reason why they're not going to be in the hunt for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think
despite the fact that Kyler Murray chose football.
Yeah, I think, though, that I don't think that's a big loss. I don't think that's a big deal because he was going to spend a couple years in the minors anyway. The thing is that as long as Oakland gets their money back, I think they'll be fine. They can use it to pay Estrada. Because I think the bonus was about the same as what they're going to pay Estrada. So there you go. In one pocket, out the other. The problem with Oakland that I see is that even if Chris Davis repeats his performance, 40 home runs, 80 to 90 RBIs, and a sub 250 average, it's not like he's a major run producer. He does hit home runs. He's not a bad player. But the reason why I made fun and I kind of used his example for the Bryce Harper thing is like, well, if you're hitting sub 250, well, you better hit some home runs because you're not giving me much else. And you're also not really driving in runs. So you're basically a rich man's Max Muncy. So it kind of goes back to that thing. It's like, I need you to produce something with it. I'd rather take a 20 home run, 100 RBI guy.
Yeah.
Not as exciting, but you're at least producing some runs for me. That's Oakland, I believe. I
right.
don't think there's too much else to say for those guys.
No, I don't think so. So let's continue northward on that trend since we're getting that way and talk about the Mariners. Mariners' probably their biggest news is they traded away Robinson Cano to the Mets. They got some decent prospects back. I'm not sure how well that's going to play into their lineup this year. I think the Mariners' best hope is they have, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, and I apologize for that, Yusei Kikuchi from Japan.
Okay.
So how is he going to play for them? And then can they have a quick turnaround? I think it's doubtful. I don't really see much happening with the Mariners.
I don't think they can say whatever they want. I don't really feel like they're acting in a way that would suggest that they're trying for a quick turnaround. I think they're just trying to see any forward progression.
No, and maybe I'm not saying they're trying. I'm not saying necessarily they're really trying for a quick turn.
Yeah.
I think that's their best hope.
Yeah.
Right now, for this season, if you're a Mariners fan, you're hoping that these prospects in the Cano trade and Kikuchi, all of a sudden it all just clicks, and then you play you win 83 games, and then
if you're
in a best case scenario,
if you're a Mariners fan, you're watching Ichiro highlights and replaying the 1995 ALDS over and over again, and just remembering that Edgar Martinez is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
you're celebrating that.
Pretty much.
That's what you're going for this season, and I think that's what you're gonna have to just ride with. This reminds me of some of the mid 2000s Jays teams, where it's like, you know what you're getting. You can kind of look at it. It's not like you need to be a deep baseball analyst to go, the team's not great. They're not necessarily trying to be great. You're just trying to find some bright spots where you can. Just show me something. Play hard. That's all I really want from you. And then as long as you get that, as a fan, you can be satisfied with it, and hopefully the ballpark experience will be good and you can enjoy that.
And Seattle's a cool town, so you got that.
So they've got some things going in there.
All right, so on to the Lone Star State. So let's go with Texas Rangers first before we go to Houston. So we both see them at the bottom of the division, mostly because there's just a whole bunch of question marks. So you have rotation questions. That's there, right? They own of all their starters, or projected starters, I should say, because you never know what's going to happen in spring training. They have one starter who hasn't undergone Tommy John, and that's Mike Minor.
Do you have a Nolan Ryan as a projected number 5 starter? Because that might help.
It might, right? That's where you're looking at. You've spent $30 million on a 3-year deal on Lance Lynn. Okay,
that's a game changer right there.
Yeah, exactly. You have Joey Gallo, who is really the poor man's version of Aaron Dunn, which means he strikes out a lot and can hit some bombs. But that's
wait. Adam Dunn.
Sorry, Adam Dunn. My apologies. Yes,
Adam. No, but also I do want to make a quick point. You said a poor man's Adam Dunn. Adam Dunn did hit some bombs and strike out. So a poor man's Adam Dunn is,
I'm just expecting more strikeouts and less home runs is what I'm saying.
What I was thinking was a poor man's Adam Dunn would be the strikeouts with pop flies. You can have some pop flies. Yeah. Oh, maybe some sacrifices. There's a poor man's Adam Dunn.
So you have some decent players, but if you look up and down the roster, it doesn't look like a roster that you just don't have enough championship caliber people or anywhere close to challenging championship caliber people, right? So you've got you've brought in Jeff Mathis, a catcher. You got Jesse Chavez, not bad pieces, but it's not really what you need yet. Those are sort of final pieces you may put in as you're rounding out a roster that already know is good. Whereas Texas is just a bunch of question marks. And they have some okay players like Sinsu Chu's all right, but he's not fantastic. Odor is Odor, right? You don't have enough pieces. I think the problem
is this is a third consecutive team where it's not that we're here to denounce anything they're doing. It's just that we haven't seen anything that has fundamentally changed over the team they fielded last year that should really change anything.
Exactly.
It's almost like they're stuck in neutral. They're not really advancing forward, but they're not really, digressing. We don't expect them to be fundamentally worse, but it's just nothing has really happened to make them fundamentally better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So on to the number 1 team then, as we both see it, the Houston Astros. So I could potentially see them maybe taking a little bit of a step back.
They should mathematically, given the last 2 seasons, because the last 2 seasons were 101 wins and 103 wins, which is exceptional. It's really top tier. And a World Series win. And honestly, I think they gave the Yankees a decent fight, when we get to the lineup a little bit, we can talk about kind of what happened there. But I think when we talk about Altuve, if Altuve had been healthy, they gave the Red Sox a fight all things considered. Now, obviously, they were.
So you said Yankees originally, but
I meant to say the Red
right?
Sox.
Just clarify.
I meant to say the Red Sox, but they gave the Red Sox a decent fight, all things considered. But obviously, they were overpowered. But it wasn't like the Red Sox ran them over.
No,
and,
it's true.
And they were a little bit depleted, all things considered.
Yeah. So I see them still winning like high 90s.
Yeah, and that's more than enough to win this division.
For sure.
So
some of the pieces then, you have Charlie Morton went out, Lance McCullers Jr.'s out, Dallas Keuchel is still free agent, so there's a possibility.
The good stat I saw was that those three pitchers accounted for over 500 innings.
Yeah,
that they lost, which is a big deal. That's a lot.
And speaking on the pitching point, you've Wade Miley coming in, but he's a reliever. And the question here is, so you have Josh James, who's now moving from the bullpen to being a starting pitcher, and the question is, how good is he going to be at that? Mm-hmm. And then last note on the pitching note, Forrest Whitley, who's their number one pitching prospect. There's some hope that he's probably going to enter the major league some point this year, and there's a lot of hype around him.
And they still have Verlander, which is kind of the anchor of the overall thing, and Garrett Cole, I believe.
Yes,
Garrett Cole.
Garrett Cole is the other one.
So those two is kind of the anchors of your staff, which is not bad. That's not a bad starting point.
Yeah,
and you're not building from scratch.
Everything points to okay, we're going to get a little bit worse, but when you're winning 101 games, 103 games, if you get a little bit worse, that's fine. Also, the thing that I really like about Houston is they don't have a lot of guys who are swing and miss guys. Right, and they brought in Michael Brantley, who I think is going to be a solid pickup from them, who's going to contribute. So I like where Houston is. I think it's a team where you can be excited about, especially giving you a chance to obviously go to the playoffs again and potentially go deep in October. So I'm high on the Astros, but again, having the fact that they've been so good lately, I expect to see a little bit of a drop off.
I think as far as pitching is concerned, that's a legitimate question. I think that's a fair point. One thing that I think has gone in their favor is the biggest transaction that you didn't mention. The Houston Astros did pick up something very important. So what they did is they traded a hitter who hit .316 and made the All-Star game for a healthy Altuve. The broken Altuve hit .316 and made the All-Star game. The broken one.
Yeah.
Who had to go into immediate knee surgery after the postseason. And now you're getting a healthy one. That's almost like a trade. It's an upgrade.
It totally is. It totally is.
It's the equivalent because now you're getting an Altuve who can contend for a batting title. That's a dangerous dude, especially because he went straight into surgery with the intention of coming back healthier.
Right.
That's a trade you'd make. Imagine trading an All-Star for a better All-Star.
No, that's amazing.
Like, that's scary.
And when you don't actually have to trade anybody.
Yeah, you
even better.
All you did was just keep the same player you already have.
Yeah.
So that's really good. And I think for the lineup, that's huge. And that's why I think it kind of goes back to the point that I was making regarding the team's offense and as far as their performance against Boston. They still did pretty well considering Altuve was a fraction of his normal self. He was broken down by that point in the season, especially. He just wasn't the player he normally is, where he can be a lot more disruptive. He can cause some issues because he's got the ability to hit, and he's also got some speed, and he can field. So basically, like I said, you took a hitter who was already pretty good, and then you replace him with a better version of that hitter who can run more and is not a defensive liability, which he was when he was hurt.
Yeah.
You got all that back, which is actually quite good. So I think from that perspective, they're good. So a little bit of regression to your point, I think, is what we can see for Houston, but still more than good enough, we think, to win this division, given the way everybody else has pretty much stood pat. Nobody's really made any big moves to close the gap.
Yeah.
So I think that is the American League West.
Yes, it is.
I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, I am too. And so next week we'll be moving to the NL Central.
The NL Central.
Which I think would be an interesting division this year. So we'll give you more on that next week. So in terms of what are we looking forward to coming up this week?
You got a thing this time.
I actually have a thing this time.
Before you do that, though, can I do one thing?
Of course.
Really quickly. I apologize to everyone for the UFC card. I didn't know. So unfortunately, the UFC card, I don't know if you caught it, the main event had to be canceled.
After you hyped the people up,
the title fight was
let down. Then
the title fight apparently.
Good thing you still have good gambling advice.
Yeah, clearly. Now, unfortunately, I didn't catch it. Obviously, I was watching the AAF. It should have been. I haven't had the chance to watch the Anderson Silva fight though. That ended up being bumped up to the main event. But it's kind of unfortunate when you lose a title fight because that's usually UFC's strength is not necessarily the main events, although the main events are important. That's kind of what you're selling the show on. But normally the depth of it, and it really felt like kind of what we discussed last week, it felt like not the strongest card they had available. but at the same time, a decent card with, a top two fights, but then you're losing one of the top, the main event, co-main event fight.
Yeah, for sure.
Always hurts.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because it was a pay-per-view, which is
Even worse
which is
for
problematic. Yeah. But it's one of those things that happens. And then obviously we're going to have, I believe this Sunday, we're going to have another fight. But that said, what are you looking forward to?
NBA All-Star Weekend. And I'm not a huge NBA guy. I do enjoy watching a game from time to time. I especially like going to games. The thing that excites me about NBA All-Star Weekend is I honestly think this is the best of all the All-Star weekends. The game itself, I mean, it's basketball with no defense. So if you like that kind of thing, great. But I love the
There's
skills
defense in basketball?
Yeah, well, sometimes.
Did someone tell James Harden?
No.
Oh, never mind. I retract my statement. Please continue.
I love the skills competition. So I don't necessarily
that I like.
Right? Like I don't
the 3 points, the 3-point
That's what I'm talking
contest
about.
is good.
But that
I like
so
that.
I don't I maybe tune into that game. The
dunk
All-Star game
contest is
itself.
garbage.
But
at this point,
well, this is just so overdone. But I enjoy I didn't like it all. Right? Like I like the 3-point contest. Yeah. The dunk contest is not as good as it once was.
This isn't a new take, by the way. I'm not going to steal anybody else's thunder or credit. I think the 3-point competition has taken the place of the dunk contest, given the way it is, because at least with the 3-point competition what it is. There's no gimmicks involved in it. You don't need technology. You don't need drones. You don't need some kind of weird. You don't need costumes in order to try to make it interesting.
And then something and take that and you combine it with the obstacle course they do for another one.
Yep.
You can appreciate it for the pure athletic ability that these guys have. Mm-hmm. That it takes to do those skills. And if you can appreciate that, then you watch this, and it's for my money in terms of, especially in terms of skill competitions, heads and tails over everything else.
Well, I think the other thing that helps it, and kind of leading to the point I was saying about the dunk contest, is the dunk contest a lot of times is that you have a set period of time to try to hit your dunk, so you can fail over and over again, where people now understand what you're trying to do, but you're still failing, but you're still trying to hit it. And then eventually it happens, and it's kind of anticlimactic.
Right? Exactly. If you don't hit it the first time, it's kind of
if you hit it the first time, then you get the reaction, you get the holes. But then the 3-point contest, the best 3-point shooters, they're going to make most of their baskets. So now it's a matter of how close to perfect can you get.
Yeah.
Can you get all, to actually try to get that high score. So there's skill involved in both.
So I'll be watching that, and I will obviously be tuning in some way, shape, or form. We'll see what happens to week 2 of the AAF.
I got to get you in on this multi-screen life, man.
I know, you really do.
You got to, that I'm all about that multi-screen life. Got to have, the game on the TV, the game on the other screen.
Maybe I'll just come over here for the multi-screen life.
If you come here, then I'm going to the ultimate multi-screen. I'm going to put 8 screens on. I'm going to find screens that you didn't even know that I had.
Yeah, okay.
The multi-screen life is all about it. So looking forward this week. Going to watch week 2 of the AAF. I do want to see the follow-up to some of it and kind of get a sense of what adjustments have been made based on week 1, because as I said, I'm hoping for progression. Week by week, I just want to see certain teams adjust. And as a football fan, I'm actually interested in that aspect of it because I do want to see what happens. There is another UFC card on, and fortunately for most people, depending on where they are, they're out in Phoenix, Arizona, and it is going to be, I believe, on the Sunday. So it is February the 17th, and it's going to be Ngannou versus Cain Velasquez as the main event. So it is on quote-unquote free TV, depending on where you are. So you got ESPN in the US, and then TSN, we got it in Canada. So you can watch the main card. So fortunately, you don't have to shell out any money for it. So that's good.
And if you're in select Canadian provinces, you can stay up late because Monday's a holiday.
That is true. That is true. As far as anything else coming up, I think that covers this weekend. I will be tuning in and checking out that 3-point competition as well. Overall, I think that sets us up very nicely for this weekend. Thanks again to anyone who's listening. And once again, I'll repeat it really quickly. We are already, as of right now, on Spotify. We are on Google Music. You can find it on unnecessarypod.podbean.com if you're so inclined. And hopefully by next week, we'll be able to announce that we're on iTunes as well. So we're going to try to get on all the platforms, even I think I'm on TuneIt is one of the ones that I applied for. So whatever is out there, we tried to put it on, and hopefully you can enjoy. If you are on one of these platforms where you can leave a comment, please do. We'd love to get the feedback.
Always love to get the feedback.
Yeah. And then, of course, we are on the YouTube channel, and we do have an Instagram, which just started. Right now, it's a glorious picture of our logo, and nothing else. We'll figure out something.
And if you are associated with the AAF in any official capacity, we would happily be sponsored by you.
Hashtag sponsor us. And can I have my swag? I need you to ship it to me in Canada. And that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast.